call the meeting to order. Would anyone like to do introductions, or should we all do introductions again? Okay, great. I'm Tally. I live here in Napa, just around the corner. I'm part of the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Ed Johnson, I live in Brownsby.
Ben Bartlett, I work for Teven Brothers.
Vicki Baird, I live in Napa.
Kelly, I'm also on the Citizen Advisory Committee.
John Bethel.
John McKesson, Brownsby.
I'm Kurt Johnson, I'm the fire chief out here because it's my building.
Our building.
Cheryl
I'm
Johnson.
one of the kids here.
Cheryl Johnson, I'm in Brownsby, I'm on the CAC, and then also our rep to the county CAC.
Julia Decker, Planning Manager, Clatsop County. I'm here because Gail is not today, and I am not typically staffing this meeting because I live in this community, and so I want to be able to participate generally as a community member, so I've stayed away from it for a while. But Gail's not here today, so I am.
And I'm Victoria Sage. I'm a planner, and I'm leading this meeting in lieu of Gail.
Jeannie Windsor, I live here in Napa. And we're missing Jen, who you knew would not be here, but we're also missing Dirk. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. So far.
Surprised Dirk's not here.
You may still show up.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do a review of the September 5 meeting summary. So it's pretty long, or is this all the notes here?
Yeah, those are just the minutes, and if anyone has any changes or comments, now's the time.
Okay. So we don't read this whole thing, right? Okay. Okay. Did anyone have anything they wanted to add about the last meeting?
I thought the minutes looked good, and over the weekend I crossed paths with some people who were on some other CACs, and I think our minutes are better than theirs. So, who takes the notes? Do you, or does?
Gail does the
I'm sorry,
minutes
Gail
for this
doesn't
meeting.
receive the compliment.
But staff takes turns, so the bad ones are probably me.
Okay. I had one thing that I wanted to add. It could be related to last week's discussion, and it also is related to this week's discussion around climate change and sea level rise that we talked about last week. I did a little research, and I brought in my computer this time because I found an interactive that NOAA does where you can look at your area and various projections for different years. So I have
Would you
it.
like to actually put down the TV?
Sure.
Love to see that.
Yeah.
We've got a.
Yeah, I found it super interesting, and I thought it was relevant to here. So
I think you should be able to link that into the Apple TV here.
I'll try. Let's maybe this button. Or
Yeah, it should be that one.
Do you have extra?
Camera room. That's it.
cool.
Probably helps if I turn the
Are there more copies of those minutes that she's looking at?
What's the code?
It's going to pop
Do you
up.
want the agenda and the
501.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll meet you halfway. Thank you.
There you go.
Great. Okay, so you can play around with this, if you want to more. I was
Kelly,
just
what's the site? So take it from the top.
coast.noaa.gov. I think that'll generally get you there, and then as you play around with it,
So,
Not that you'll get it in Brownsby.
I know. Yeah.
We talk about the internet every time.
I know it comes up frequently, but you're welcome to bring it up
so
again.
what are we looking at?
Okay, so right now what you're looking at is I have it set to year 2050, and down here it has, this is all variable based on what we do.
So what are they guessing in 2050?
What they're guessing is intermediate low rise would be 0.3 feet. Intermediate,
0.3?
right. Intermediate, so, yeah, okay, I'll just, yeah, so 1.18 feet would be like intermediate high, high would be 1.4, or 8.4 and extreme. Right. So, but what the map is showing you is like what happens under these different scenarios. So right now it's set, here I'll set it back to like current. So the green is low-lying areas. But then as you say like, okay, let's call it, we're gonna do pretty good and we're gonna, hit around intermediate or intermediate high, because it's, we're not gonna stop using carbon tomorrow, but we're gonna try and do something to not have it be this extreme. So then you can see which areas are now flooded. Let's say we, don't do enough, and it all, they're more the higher end of what they expect to happen.
Well,
That
that's
ends up
not
being-
taking into consideration that we have dikes and tide gates there.
I
And we actually had 22 inches to spare in 2007. So
I don't know. I'm just looking at the map. So I'm not trying to say like I don't know how they're, what they're saying, but right. So yeah, I found it interesting to see like, okay, that's quite a bit of Brown's Mead, that's something that we want to, when we're talking about climate change and wanting to mitigate or, reduce the impact, like that's what we're talking about, is trying to keep that number as low as possible so that we save as much of this land as possible. This is 2050, so that's like when our kids are in their 30s, we can go up higher, and then the extreme projection, is way up here versus, or, the intermediate one.
see, I have heard between 3 and 10 feet.
Right, yeah, so this only goes up to 10 feet as the highest you can go. And then we even have some problems in Astoria. Yeah, I just wanted to show the interactive because I found it interesting and relevant. So yeah, if you're interested in looking at it more, we can do that another time maybe. But, okay. So, now we'll go to the report that's you, Cheryl, from the other,
From the countywide
Yeah.
CAC. The September countywide CAC was supposed to be on agriculture, but we only got through half of it. So, and this month, October, there is a workshop, which I'm sure you all got, a workshop on forestry.
I have a handout for all the CAC members.
Which is on goal 4. So that, let's see, September, October, that rolls us over to November. So in November, we will finish our discussions of agriculture. So if anybody is interested in talking about agriculture at the county-wide level, it will still be happening in November. They had an in-service for us from the woman who heads up the Soil and Water Conservation District. It was supposed to be 20 minutes. The presentation was 40 minutes. There was a lot of discussion and we didn't get finished. So the discussion on what was supposed to be 1 month is going to roll into 2 months ago.
sorry, can you go back? What was the presentation on? And do you have anything, you said it was 40 minutes, but what did she talk about?
Can you help me out?
I wasn't at the meeting, but it was the Clatsop Soil and Water Conservation District. So they deal a lot with helping landowners just basically manage their, their stormwater and waste and manure and such.
Yeah, so she basically talked about what their organization does.
Noxious weeds, you do wonderful noxious weed work.
A lot of the discussion centered around small farms. So the fact that small farms in Clatsop County are growing, and I think Kelly is a good example of that. So the EFU is 80-acre minimum, but there are a lot of new young farmers, especially who are doing organic things, that are well under 80 acres and are contributing to this whole concept of agriculture and how do they fit in, how do we protect them even though they're less than 80 acres. So a lot of the discussion was around that. And then a lot of the discussion also was around how do we continue to defend large farms that do fit that 80 acres. And there was a lot of discussion about subdivisions that get built next to agricultural land and about the smell and how offensive that is to them, which is one of the things that the land use laws were written to protect. I mean, one of the things that the land use laws say is that priority will be given to the EFU land, and that things that are adjacent to that have to be compatible, and that the EFU and the agricultural guarantees take precedent. So that was a long, long discussion too. And so I think that's it. That's my summary from the countywide one. I also-
And the wisdom back in the 70s when all this started, all of Brownsmead is EFU.
And I went to two other events recently having to do with watersheds and forestry, and I would do a brief presentation on those at whatever point in the agenda you want.
Great.
I know Southern Water has a population meeting coming up in about a week, I think. I got a notification where Portland State, I think, is going to talk about this. And at the previous meeting, you said that we really weren't going to grow. In fact, we were going to lose about 2,000 population in a forecast. And I find that rather troubling as someone who's trying to fund a district out of the people who are there. And so, you know, and the housing is a huge problem. So I guess I'm adding something to that. So I hope we all go to the population thing and ask why.
Are you talking about the projections that were in the that we talked about last time? Right. Yeah, because I don't think I personally said that. I felt like I said that I thought we were going to expand more than what the projections are saying. But yeah.
Well, that's exactly where we've been for 20 years. We don't seem to get any more people than fewer people per household, per tax lot. It was also forecast. So.
Yeah. Do we want to do that now or as part of the goal 3? Do you think it relates to goal 3?
It probably more relates to goal 4. Both of the events that I went to were related to watersheds and forestry.
Okay.
So we could pop them at the end of the one.
Okay, great. Let's do that. Okay, so does someone want to give an overview of goal 3?
Hey, Tor, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Just for, I find like throughout this all the meetings, I was wondering if, and we could ask Gail if she'd be into this too, at the beginning of the staff presentation, can we just like do a brief statement of like what the scope of what we're doing here is? Because I feel like it's not always known by people that are coming in and out.
Right, what the update is.
Yeah, and just like what we are, or just what it is briefly, and like what the Citizen Advisory Committee does and what we can't do, because I feel like there's a little confusion about that last time, and just like remembering it at the beginning every time might be nice for everyone to just kind of be like, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Like just a few sentences or something.
Yeah, that's fine. Do you want staff to do that?
Yeah, if that,
Okay.
or I mean, whatever. I just thought it would be easy to kind of tackle
Yeah,
at
no
the beginning
problem.
of the overview.
Sure. Yeah, so this is the Citizen Advisory Committee for this planning area, which is northeast. So that encompasses Swenson, Brownsmead, John Day, and then all the way out to Westport too. So each planning area has their own community plan. And so we're not only going to be looking at the community plans, but also the goals that are for the countywide goals. So there's statewide planning goals and the countywide planning goals, which are based on kind of an idealistic public need and also based on state regulations. And they all are having to be consistent with the state goals. The comprehensive plan is basically the framework that all the zoning ordinances are based on. So it's sort of how we implement the comprehensive plan. And our comprehensive plan was originally done in 1979 and implemented in 80. So it's been a long time since it's actually been really revised. I think there were a few updates in the early 90s, but it hasn't really been made relevant since that time. So it's gonna be about a three-year-ish process. We're gonna try to meet, monthly or as close to that as we can, and at our own pace to get through everything and have the citizens involved in the planning process. So
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, especially when I went to these 2 workshops that were on watersheds and forestry, about how much strength or power or teeth or enforcement or whatever does the land use comprehensive plan actually have. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and I'm sorry that Gail's not here, and we will probably have this discussion again and again as we evolve. And I think, I asked last time, are we doing general things or are we doing specific things? And I think, was it you who said that we could be writing findings? Was that the word that you were using?
No, I was just talking about the first little workshop we had. They were talking about using language that was enforceable versus, not enforceable, and how useful that is for
Enforceable policies.
Yeah, enforceable policy management is what they were talking about.
Yeah, so I am curious about findings. Are we writing findings? Are you writing findings based on our discussion?
yeah, to my understanding, staff will be the people actually, writing the text, but it will be based on all of our discussion and desires here.
For the
Is that
whole
right?
writing.
Yeah.
So you'll do, I'll just jump in.
Great.
So what you'll do is, you're looking at the large picture right now. You're looking county-wide, but you're also bringing to it your specific scope within this community. So you're trying to do both at the same time, and at the end of all of this, then you'll focus in down on the Northeast area. So at the goals and the policies, they're aspirational. This is what we'd like to do, this is what we'd like to see, this is what we think is going to guide how we want our communities to be. And I'm using community in the broader sense here. I don't just mean like the rural community, which was updated in 2003, but I mean the Northeast area, the county in general, just not inside the city limits. But the comprehensive plan is this aspirational document, and it guides our land and water development and use ordinance, which has a terrible acronym. We refer to it as the LUDWO, just to be funny. We're going to rename it. I think we're calling it the
Law duck.
Law Duck. Now, we like that better. But anyway, we're going to rename the Land and Water Development and Use Ordinance because nobody can say the acronym. But that's the implementing document. Those are the regulations. But they are devised off of the comp plan. So we have to devise the comp plan first to get to the point where we can then create implementing ordinances, regulations that actually say these are the policies, these are the standards, these are the criteria that you can develop with. This is what you can do in this particular area. This is what, we're going to be heading toward. You're talking about EFU zoned now, mostly ag and AF. We'll be headed toward forestry after that. And you're going to walk through, basically, in chronological order, no less, each of the goals and policies that applies. So you're starting with the big picture. You're starting with the gestalt, and then we'll narrow down. So you're writing aspirational goals. We'll write findings, and then we'll try, and it will be recursive because you will keep coming back to some of the things you've already talked about so that everything works together. And I'm pretty sure Gail's probably already talked to you about that, but does that help frame it for you a little bit?
Yeah, I think my desire in just stating all of this again is just that I find it is kind of a little nebulous because it's so big picture, and just reminding people that we don't have the power to change a zoning thing in the citizen advisory committee or something, just remembering what it is and that it's a broader thing, and that we're making the suggestions but we're not actually writing the document per se. It's just kind of what I wanted to be remembered, but the whole process in general.
So after you take our stuff, the staff writes it, then it comes back to us for regurgitation again?
Absolutely.
We can look at it and
multiple
say,
times.
good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, multiple times. It's going to make the rounds. We'll write materials. Actually, what we were looking at is trying to get everybody through the end of Goal 4 by the end of November, And then everybody takes a hiatus there right around the beginning of the year and then comes back to it. During that time, staff is going to try and draft materials for 1 through 4 and then bring those back. So you have an opportunity to take a look at those and work on them. Well, right, well, it's still fresh. In the meantime, we'll move forward with goal 5, which is huge and which will probably take 2 or 3 months because it's such a vast goal.
Which one is fine?
Goal 5 is open spaces and recreation and natural resources and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
So
it's
everything.
huge. Yeah, wetlands, yeah, everything. It's not goal 16 and 17, which is coastal shorelands and that estuary and the Columbia River. Goal 5 is more of the, like the Clatsop Plains and some of the other areas. We'll get there.
Okay, I'm glad to hear this because we're now in meeting number 4. So, it's beginning to gel what we are and are not doing, but we keep coming up with more questions. So that's what I was concerned about, is that we're just talking and talking and talking, and people are taking notes, and then does it all just go nowhere? But now you're saying that within a short period of time, you're going to write up 3 and 4, bring it back to us. That's the piece that we didn't understand.
Right, and so then after it comes back to the committee, maybe once, maybe twice, I don't know how many times, it's also going to go to the CAC, and the CAC is going to toy with it too. And you'll all have, through years of liaison, so you'll be bringing information back and forth too. So there's going to be lots of words, lots and lots of words.
I just don't want you to go,
No.
I just have a quick question. I sit on a lot of different boards, and this is a new one for me to come and visit. But my question is, I think the advisory council is the one that's meeting, and we're a guest watching, or do we interject at the end if we have something to say? That's how I think it's supposed to be done, but I see people do it, they just talk, and I'm just curious how that works in this particular situation. So you know what I'm saying?
Well, a lot of the committees function differently. Everybody seems to have their own level of informality. So it's really kind of up to the chair, whoever's chairing the meeting. Some of them are going through very formal, let's make motions and let's do it this way. And other people are having more of a roundtable discussion.
That's fine. I just wondered if there was a policy, because I didn't, or not a policy, a procedure that you actually follow.
It's
in
really,
this.
it's been up to the committees how they want to run it.
Okay, thank you.
and I can tell you that the countywide CAC, the person who is facilitating and chairing is very inclusive, and in fact, one of the things that took too long last time, so you can say I'm not happy about that, is get everybody in the room introduce themselves, and that they were free to come in and participate in the discussion at any point. So at the countywide level, people who are not, representing are full participants, and so.
Which seems like it's like here, there's been bigger crowds and smaller crowds, and I just always thought that we had to, that would be at the end of a meeting, and they ask if there's any public comment, so.
Yeah, and I
was
think
checking.
Jen's been facilitating it with
It's
anybody
been
up
pretty
there.
open.
And I saw that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that sometimes it isn't appropriate what I have to say, so I actually email Gail with a comment or something I learned, and that, I feel that gets there somehow. And then now that I know it's coming back, I can say, what did you think? It was actually referring her to Yamhill and Benton County for some ways that they're dealing with housing.
Okay, let's.
Can I ask a quick one?
Yep,
before?
of course.
So, back in the 70s when all this began, we actually took a look at particular parcels, like say Westport along the slough there. Should that be industrial? Should it be conservation? We voted on that kind of stuff, and I think that's what ended up in the plan. Is this committee actually, can they take a look at something and say, that was good 40 years ago, but maybe it's not
That's
appropriate?
exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
It's looking back at the whole thing, what worked, what didn't, going forward, next 20 years, what do we think we should see, what would we like to see, what is happening that we don't want to see, how can we fix it?
Okay.
That is exactly what you're doing.
But my sense is because, I sat on that
Yeah.
thing and
many
you
years
did,
ago.
a number of us old timers did. We're not going to go parcel by parcel and decide what should happen with them. So it's a very different process than what we did. And that's part of, I'm not coming in with a blank slate, I'm having to unlearn the old. And so it's more broad, it's more general. We're not going to do zoning on individual parcels, is my understanding.
Right, no, you wouldn't be doing zoning on individual parcels, but you might be looking at it and saying, oh, hey, we've got this type of zoning over here, and maybe we'll make a recommendation that be reviewed because the type of activity that's going on over here, it didn't develop the way we thought it would. So, you might be making recommendations about how to look at the way things have progressed, because we thought it was going to be more commercial than it is, and now it's more light industrial. That's what we're seeing in Miles Crossing, for example. I staff the Lewis and Clark Only Woman Ski Group, and so I'm thinking that they're going to be looking at that pretty hard, because Miles Crossing and Jeffers Garden turned out differently than what people thought it was going to be like.
Right.
So I'm thinking that people are probably going to be looking at that. And you may end up looking at things within this community as well, or Westport, or Swenson, or
Okay.
Brownsmead.
Great. Let's move on to the goal 3 overview. That's where we're at. Does staff do that? Great.
Yeah. So goal 3 deals with agricultural lands, and what we're really talking about is protecting farmlands, and we do that on a local level through zoning ordinances. So as far as agricultural lands go, specifically the EFU, which is short for exclusive farm use, and the AF zone, which is short for agricultural forestry. A lot of regulations in the EFU zones are set by the state statute, so we're very limited on what we can change. The state is very protective of farm and forest lands, so if you want to change them or convert to housing or commercial non-farming use, you have to take a goal exception, which you have to prove to the state that there's no other way you can put housing or this commercial use anywhere else in the county. Yeah, there are ways to put houses on farmlands, but mostly they're in conjunction with farm use, so it is very difficult for a good reason. Pretty much it.
I was wondering if Kelly could talk a little bit about small farms and how they're different than the EFU, and if we're doing enough in the plan to, I don't know, not to put you on the spot, but, or I guess to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, I honestly don't know exactly where our farms would be in this goal, because it is mostly talking about exclusive farm use. It wouldn't really be part of it. That being said,
Probably RA.
I am, yeah, I'm RA. So that being said, I still think EFU, as a small farmer who couldn't find EFU land that was affordable to buy and farm on, I still think it's very important to protect it, and I feel like this goal as it's written now is there's not a lot of substance to it, and so and just it seems just more it's, to me when I was reading it, just the actual itself couple page goal was very much it's terrible to farm here, don't even bother. The end was how it read to me, which is depressing as someone who wants to bring farming back to Placer County. So that would be my 2 cents, is just that there should be some more we want to bring farming back, and yeehaw, as opposed to wah wah, this doesn't really work. And then Gail brought that example of Lake County, and there was a couple bullet points on there that I thought would be interesting. Just basically saying as much as we still want people to farm here, as opposed to how it's reading now is basically don't bother farming here. To me, is how I read it. So
I think it's because when it was set up,
Right.
it was looking how to protect the big boys.
right, exactly, and it definitely reads
so
as
right
a large
now,
scale.
You fall between the cracks.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Because it was strictly to protect the
Right.
big players, especially because I think some people had the foresight to see what the metro area was going to do growth-wise. And that Willamette Valley has the reputation for being the prime
Right.
farmland
Right.
for the entire state.
Right.
So
It
yeah.
definitely reads with that mentality of what farming is, and especially on large scale export driven farming is that's what it's in the back of your mind. That's clearly what.
So do you feel there's a way we could change the comprehensive plan to be more supportive of?
I mean, sure, I mean,
small
even I
farms?
think as like, just changing the like, feeling of it to be, I mean, because like they talk constantly about like exporting to Portland is like the only way that there's a market, as you know, and not like talking about local agriculture at all. I mean, there's just like little things that could easily change to kind of shift the like mindset of it, at least a little bit, and just saying that that's a possibility as opposed to, I mean, I'm not saying that like no large agriculture should exist here. If it can, I think it would be fine, but that's not the only thing, and using it, the only viable market being Portland or farther away is not necessarily true, and just kind of shifting some of the focuses in it.
Well, let me ask staff, what goal addresses like RA2, RA5? Is that under housing?
Those are rural lands and they're gonna show up throughout.
Okay, because that, I think, is where you probably need to emphasize and strengthen the need to provide the opportunity. Because let's face it, people like you are never gonna want 80 acres. You may not
That might
even
not
want.
be true, but yeah. No, we can't necessarily afford it, but yeah.
Can you take care of 80 acres? I mean,
I
that's.
mean, I would love to try.
Well, the RA zones though, that's residential agriculture. The agriculture is in there for a reason.
Right.
Farming is a use in the RA
Right.
zone.
Right.
So I definitely believe that there's something that maybe we could do to respect and
Yeah.
encourage
Right.
that
And maybe strengthen.
in the ag, in goal 3. So,
Or yeah, just mention that it is part of the picture.
well, there's a different feel today. There's an awful lot of people who would prefer to buy their produce locally, for example,
Right, exactly.
who are looking at not going to commercial ag. And
Right.
Well,
Sorry.
it's not even produce. I mean, you only
Yeah.
have to look at Puget Island and they have,
Exactly.
the specialty meat growers,
Right,
whether
right.
it's, Long Island beef or whether it's something pork or lamb or goat. But again, whether you've got 2 acres or 15 acres or are fortunate to have 25 acres, something under that EFU,
Right.
how could the plan protect you from the RA2 next to you who doesn't like the smell or the sound of it?
Right.
So I want to understand more the difference. So the exclusive farm use has to be 80 acres, and does your zoning give you the same tax benefits as them?
No, but I can apply for them.
You can apply
Yeah,
for
so there's
them.
you get a tax break
tax
as
deferment.
if you are making a certain income level or revenue from farm practices on EFU, and then if you don't make that, then you have to pay
Your
regular
regular.
taxes. But as on RA, if you make a certain level, you can apply to get that tax benefit. So.
And then what she's saying is the EFU is protected from the subdivision that doesn't like the smell,
Explicitly protected.
but you're not.
No. So there are small farms, and I've known people in other parts of the state that their neighbors have shut them down because they didn't want
Like it.
there to be a farm there for
Right.
whatever reason. And there's not that explicit protection that there is.
So
for
that
EFU.
could be something we could potentially
so
give
that might
more
be-
teeth to the small farm in protecting it from that kind of thing.
So that's maybe what you're talking about is how to help promote the smaller pieces.
Just give them the same protections that you would give an 80-acre hay bale farm,
Or at least a
to
frontage
someone that's
tax.
actually producing vegetables and food that, is for the local community.
I can give you an example. I raise sheep, so I have guard dogs. Out in the Clatsop Plains, where you see that sign for the beef, buy a half a beef or whatever it is, tag. Neighbors there complained about the guard dog, and the guy actually got fined $250 for the guard dog. It's an accepted agricultural use, but the county enforced their noise ordinance in spite of what the comprehensive plan said.
Okay.
And that was on EFU zone property?
Yeah.
Huh. That seems like that shouldn't have been allowed because it's supposed to be
Well,
protected.
at one time, like an idiot, I can't find it now, but when I was having issues with people complaining about my garden, they suggested you get it debarked. Well, debarked is not a guard dog.
Right.
No, it's not cool at
So
all.
I actually had a
Nor
letter
humane.
I
Nor
phoned up
humane, yeah.
State Department of Agriculture and told them what the issue was. They sent me a letter saying that was a legitimate use. And I provided the sheriff on that occasion with a copy of the letter. They still got fined.
And I would just like to hop in here too, so in the minutes, so two things, in the findings, I think the findings need to reflect the new number of small farmers that there are in Clatsop County now. And if it's possible, what kind of a financial impact do they have? I mean, I didn't see that in here, and things have changed. So in those findings, if we can reference how that is now, and that it's growing and that it's changing, and then for sure in the protections, if we can figure out a way to share a lot of those protections for the EFU for the smaller farms. I don't have a clue how to do that, but I think that's the direction.
Yeah,
that we
and I
want
think
to
this
go. I
also
think that's what we want to do.
goes into our next point, which is about, how will climate change affect farming? But I think there's like a reverse way you can look at that. How will farming affect climate change? Because if we're getting more of our food locally, then that's food that's not being transported on giant trucks, that has a much lower carbon footprint, So I think as we're supporting local farming, that's also helping us in combating climate change.
I guess I'd like to take it in a little different direction. As I understand it, Kelly lives at where Napa Water is on one side of the road and Swenson Wickiup Water is on the other side of the road. Well, Wickiup Grange just received a donation of some land. But as I understand it, there's a moratorium on building because they can't get enough water in Swenson to either service a business or to put out fires. Not true?
Nope, hasn't been for years.
Thank you. Well, I will move on because I think I still have a point. The difference in cost for her across the street is enormous. And, wow, that's really, okay, that's good to know. Anyway, so I'm worried that while Napa has a lot of surplus water, Swenson Wickiup does not. And can we get around that? Can we sell water into their...
That's not true either.
Oh, my.
I used to be on the board.
Yeah, please, I know you are.
Which board, we did?
Yeah.
It's not what? I missed that one.
It's not true. They've got plenty of water, and they've upgraded the pipes, and there's not a moratorium on new meters anymore. There hasn't been for about 10 years. So, and you can't mix the water systems, right, Ed? Because you guys are on well, and they're on surface.
Well, and they're a taxing district.
And you guys are an association.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're member owned.
Never mind. Well, I'm not sure. It's still, I still worry that Napa has excess water and other parts of the county does not.
Well, I wouldn't
I
say
would
we have
hesitate
excess
to
water.
ever declare we have access to water.
Well, I stepped
Not a
in
public
today.
meeting, no.
I would never.
Wow, okay, I stand corrected.
I don't know how far water rights go back, but you might be surprised that Astoria has water rights out here.
Oh, I know that everything is
Okay, I would
over-permitted.
never intimate that we have more water than we need, never.
Well,
I
we
certainly
don't.
would put out that we have enough for growth and housing, so, and if Swenson has that now, then that should become more common knowledge, because I think it was inhibiting people, and I'll be happy to announce that.
Do you have adequate water for current needs?
It tends to come on when I turn it.
No one complains about the water until it doesn't come on.
Okay, so does anyone else have anything to add about the first 2 points, either how zoning affects farming in Clatsop County or how climate change will affect farming in Clatsop County? Seems like if Brownsmead totally floods, that might be a problem for
Well, it's
all our
not that way.
farmland.
It's the pastures get wetter, we have to deal with more acre feet of water per annum. And that's kind of what we're trying to work on now. And we're getting a lot of help from Public Works, actually. So we're trying to reestablish what it used to be, the good, well-drained, beautiful farmland in 20-acre farmsteads. But now it's much different. But
What it used to be was natural wetlands. Let's be honest about it. What it used to be was natural wetlands.
Sure.
So I'm not sure what that, why that
Before the
matters.
dikes were built, it was wetlands.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was Thailand, you know,
Right.
so,
So basically levees have created an artificial environment. So when you say going back to, how far back do you want to go?
to, actually, when the levees were built and we signed a deal. with
Right,
the
but I
federal
mean, some people might think go back to allowing them to go back the way nature created them, which was wetlands.
I wasn't here.
Previously.
And we're prior converted, I mean, it's just not a relevant discussion, I think that came up earlier, is that in Brownsmead, you couldn't change a tax lot. There isn't a single one, and that should be just a big flag up there. Don't come here expecting to subdivide. We have these rules that can never change, and people wouldn't make as many mistakes if they knew that from the get-go. So,
And I think that was kind of going off of that mentioned, I can't remember exactly where in here in the beginning, talking about how there seems, I mean, the whole reason this like EFU and specifically the agricultural license we talked about was created as a goal was to preserve it from being like subdeveloped and all, you know, but there was, even though that's a stated goal, there still is a little bit of a like, it's land that is EFU or designated for farming in some way can still be, you know, bought by people that don't farm or that, you know, have those kind of things, and how to put that in there to kind of still protect those lands at all. I mean, the goal itself doesn't have any protection verbiage in it to me when I read it. The classic one.
It's not regulatory,
Exactly.
and it's not, goals aren't.
Yeah, right.
The
But
the ordinance would be.
right. Not like necessarily regulatory, but like just saying that like Clatsop County, you know, values agriculture and we want to like help preserve that would be better than like or all farms are going away, which is like kind of what it, to me is what it reads like.
But you see a shift.
Right, or just stating that in there that like we support agriculture in Clatsop County or would like to continue to support or grow agriculture as part of the goal, you know, like just restating that like that is a desired thing.
More
It's,
emphasis.
yeah, just like, you know.
Are Christmas
Agriculture's
tree
great.
farms considered agriculture?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a lot of
Swinson
those.
Island used to be a big farm,
Right.
and the dike breached, and it's half a farm now, and I think it'd be really hard to get that back. Farmland. I don't know all the details, but I think it's dedicated wetland now. They were glad to get it.
Okay. Does anyone have anything that they want to add about how climate change will affect farming? So how can we balance demand for affordable housing with the requirements to preserve and protect agricultural resource lands?
well, actually, Brownsmead has quite a few houses, I think I mentioned, that were flipped. And there's still, there's an essential difference between Clatsop number 1 drainage and Dike 7. And when you look at a map, nobody lives in Tideland. Very few people live in the Tideland. We're in Brownsmead, in the drainage district, we have maybe 50 houses in there. There used to be a lot more. There may have been 60 tax lots. But some of the houses have gotten kind of overwhelmed. And again, the rules about wetlands and the building are quite onerous. And I would like to see it easy for people to flip and raise their houses up to above the FEMA flood line. So you see it on tribal reservations down in California. They just have these, they just raise them up. And so I'd like to see that encouraged so that we can keep people there and keep, well, someone to maintain the dikes and make the pastures profitable.
Talk about housing, I don't know, to me the question is, should an EFU be concerned with housing?
Right.
I mean, you either feed people or you house them. You have to have both. I would think that my personal opinion is an EFU serves primary purpose of agriculture, and they shouldn't Dirk Rome shouldn't be worried about Clatsop County needing 15 new houses.
Well, and we have such a small amount of EFU land at all, like, don't take it away.
And I don't care if you're Washington County or
Right.
Clackamas County or Clatsop County, it exists for a particular reason, and that is to provide food resources. So I don't look at the two as any kind of an overlap, an abutment, which you talk about how to protect the EFU on one side of the fence and the out-of-stater who doesn't like the smell, but to me, there shouldn't be a concern in an EFU about housing.
Right, but then if we wanted to potentially give more weight to RA land, then it could get into that, right? Like,
That would be
right,
where to address
Exactly.
RA1, RA2,
Right.
RA5,
right,
because that all goes back to cost
right.
and how close you are to your neighbor. But
Right.
to me, an EFU
Right.
serves a primary purpose, period, black and white.
Which
But I
is,
can give you an example of where in a grounds meter, it's not necessarily black and white. Because out along the river, there's a piece of property there, 2 acres of which are buildable out there, Dr. Chains.
Yes.
Uh,
Where it breached.
Yeah, and some other people around on the hill land there, back when, whatever that proposition you had to put in your claim so you could still do something. I don't remember which one that was, a few years back. And a couple of them put in this claim also, so to me, you're still not safe because then you say the guy built on his 2 acres, and pretty soon he's bitching about flies and noises and whatever. So I don't see even a place like Brownsmead. Granted, the tideland it's not buildable because you can't get septic permits and you just can't do stuff. But that still doesn't mean you're safe because the people that build on these little higher pieces around it, you're still
Right,
vulnerable.
but her question of, where does housing fit into EFU? Should it?
We would love those lots built. I actually wrote the letter between Chang and the district, and, he got them because Gary Miller had found this breach which made there was too much sand, it didn't qualify for EFU. It was cute. I mean, I was amazed that he could actually do that. And he did it, and I would love to see it built because there'd be more tax base and more people to support the dike.
So
So,
you and I would have a long discussion.
well,
Because I wrote letters to the county exactly opposite of what you did.
okay.
And
But
also tried to
focusing
get
on-
my neighbors to do the same.
On her next point about housing in an EFU.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's just something they're trying to look at. I don't think they were saying, specifically EFU, just like these two values of like, the EFU is how the plan expresses the value of agriculture. But then there's also this value that we're saying we need more affordable housing. So I think what you're saying, which I agree with, is that EFU isn't a solution to affordable housing. We need to find that affordable.
It's not the place, for me, it's not the
Right,
place
it's not
to
the
look.
place to look. So we still need to look at that, and I think that's like a future goal.
I guess I wanted to say, and I'm not sure this is true again, but we do need worker housing, and that's why, again, these old tax lots that Brownsmead had, every 20 acres, some have declined and are nothing there, should be on the table. They don't interface with the AFU land. They were set aside as small 1-acre parcels like mine is.
Right, they were grandfathered in.
Exactly, but those, we shouldn't let those decline to where nobody can live there, and we should kind of keep the stock going so that Dirk can have workers at his dairy and all the other people. So worker housing is a factor.
which is, you can apply for it on the EFU land to get
Correct.
specifically worker housing.
Yes.
So
And
it's
I just
not
want to keep the ones we
separate.
got, the tax lots that were there, maybe in 1979 that are no longer functioning now. Name War is one, I think, would be an example. It just got hung up in the change of ownership, and it really never got built on. There were several like that. So there were in the past, my remembrance, that they wanted to set out tax lots if there had been a historic tax lot with a house on it. They wanted to kind of pull that out of the system, and we might consider that here too. So.
And I think this is the heart of the question. How do we balance the demand for affordable housing with requirements to preserve and protect, and not just EFU, because EFU is 80 acres, those are big chunks. I think the protections around those are fairly clear and fairly consistent, but these smaller pieces that now can go into small farms, how do we protect those? I think that's our question, and I think that's the direction that we're saying we would like to encourage Clatsop County to go. How can we expand the protections for those smaller pieces? So that 5 acres has some protection. My property is 12.8, and 100 years ago, we voluntarily put it in EFU. We're not 80 acres, we never will be, but we put it in EFU, and it was 2 tax lots. We put them together so that it would stay that way, so that it doesn't get divided up into 2 pieces and get sold and then gets, taken out of that. And those little pieces can get sold. And for instance, last time when we were here, the gentleman came and said that he wants to do affordable housing. He has one plot that he would like to divide into 4 and make affordable housing. And affordable housing was an issue we talked about early on. How do we get more affordable housing in Clatsop County? It is an issue. And so how do we not give away these little pieces? How do we not divide up these little pieces in order to fulfill affordable housing? How do we instead protect them for agriculture?
Well, I think, Brownsmead's a little unique because of the lay of the land, the whole area got designated EFU. So in your 13 acres or whatever you have, you don't have to take in a net profit or net whatever it is, whatever the dollars is. You don't have to do that because it was trying to protect an area as opposed to a particular piece of property. So say a guy with Austin's house with 13 acres and it's EFU and he can't build 20 houses or whatever, it's EFU and that's the way it is, whether he makes anything off it or not. So the land is protected, which was the idea of the thing back in 79.
Revenue that is, I'm not sure how pervasive it is, but there is a lot of hunting going on, and I've heard that people pay thousands a year. So you're trying to protect the wetland values, and usually the wetlands are not good for ag anyway. They're peat soils, or they're just too wet. But somehow the comprehensive plan maybe should say that this is okay, because when one group floods it, that means it's another acre foot or 2 that the other group that's trying to grow grass doesn't have to deal with if it's done properly. And that's kind of the things we're trying to build in as we redo the system in Brownsmead, so that there's more opportunity for flooding when you want wetlands values, and yet also good opportunity for growing grass, which is our bread and butter. So, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm sorry Dirk's not here today. It's why I brought Tillamook cheese, because we're talking about ag today, and 2 of the remaining dairies in Clatsop County are in our northeast area, so I thought that we should be eating Tillamook cheese today.
He did send me a text saying he had 2 soccer games, 2 different places, and couldn't be here.
I know that one well, yes, that's Saturday morning. So
Maybe we can have them give a brief statement at the beginning of the next meeting.
yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll just deal with housing when we get to housing then, where we do think the solution to that is. Marijuana. Farm crop or noxious weed? My understanding is that they've actually overproduced since it became legal.
It's not in Oregon.
Is that the case?
They flooded them with
Shock.
I don't.
Growing more than they legally are allowed. What a shock.
Yeah, so I heard that there's maybe a stop or a hold on it for now, or I don't know. I don't know a ton about it.
I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it, but I don't think we have the greatest area for growing marijuana with dampness here, so I don't think it's as big of it. I don't know, maybe there's a whole bunch of barns that are applying, I don't know.
There's an awful lot of indoor grow.
Right.
There's a lot in the LC Jewel area.
Right. But I can't see in this area it being a big outdoor production, but small. But indoor grow, you wouldn't.
So what does that have to do with the comprehensive plan? Like if somebody has an indoor grow, they're not they don't have a farm, right?
Well, it's on farmland, a lot of it is on farmland. It's in
Oh.
the AF zone, some of it's EFU, some of it's in the forestry zone, because you can, in the F80 zone, do farming. It's something you can get a permit to do. So,
So is the question how it would affect a neighboring farm?
well,
I mean, we already know there are lawsuits by wineries. We already know there are lawsuits in southern Oregon because my understanding is the smell in the valleys can be very persuasive. What would it do to a dairy? If a winery loses the sale of their grapes because it might have been tainted, could that affect a dairy farm? Could it affect you growing produce? That, to me, is the only relationship it would have.
well, there's also the issue of, which we were seeing for a while when the legislation first passed and the voters approved it and the floodgates sort of opened. We saw an awful lot of interest in people converting small farm areas to marijuana production, taking it out of one type of farming, putting it into production of marijuana. And so, yeah, it was taking farmland out. It's slowed down now. We're not getting nearly the inquiries that we were.
But you're still farming. It's just
Right,
the
you're
crop
still
you're
farming.
growing is,
So that's
yeah.
the question is,
Right,
you know,
that's the question, like,
do you want to
what do we
see it go
value
out of
as-
being for food production into, cannabis production?
Right.
I mean, it
That's
seems
what
like
people
that
use.
was probably a lot of people thought they were going to make a whole lot more money, and now that the price has
Some
tanked.
people are making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, on like broad comprehensive plan thing, it's like in like where the value is, like,
Right.
would be
But
like,
if you're
yeah.
zoned an EFU
Yeah.
or even an RA2, agricultural, and I don't know, does the comprehensive plan decide what you can and can't grow? Okay, maybe I don't
No.
want to grow vegetables, maybe I want to grow flowers.
Very
It does
broad.
not.
Maybe she decides that there's more money in growing hemp because she's got a child to put through college. Maybe somebody's found a way to grow beef cattle or whatever, but there's a high spot over here. I mean, are you talking about changing the comprehensive plan where locally you have the right to pick and choose what is grown?
The comprehensive plan does not distinguish different types of crops
Okay.
from one another. The county's ordinance does not either. And that's one of the reasons the county was being investigated and pinged so heavily by all of these different entities from other parts of the state, from other parts of the United States, frankly, because we don't differentiate between tomatoes and cannabis. We don't, you want to grow blueberries? Fine, here's your permit. You want to grow pot? Fine, here's your permit. We don't differentiate. The question we're asking is, do you see an issue with that or not?
Right.
Because we don't differentiate.
And there was an article in the paper, or maybe a letter to the editor about hemp recently. So hemp is in the same category, it's just considered a crop.
Yeah,
A
it's
crop,
just crop.
period.
My thought was it sometimes takes a lot of electricity, and I wondered about that. When you're growing pot, in the past, I knew people before it was legal, and they were getting busted because their power bill was going up. But as a global warming thing, I think we need to talk about maybe other ways of providing energy for whatever agriculture is. That happens to be one that I knew of, but energy is going to be important.
Definitely.
So,
That's a good. That's a good point.
Maybe it's a non-issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't see how, like you said, can we, I personally would rather people grow vegetables or food or whatever than everybody grow pot, but how do you, pick what you're going to support with different, how do you have a different standard? I'd prefer we have a code that supports local agriculture versus exporting everything, but I think it's a little challenging to have all these different values in the codes. So we tend to, it seems like default to just having one standard that then everything applies to.
So in other counties, like you said, we were kind of singled out as being unique in that we don't differentiate. Is there different levels or, yeah?
Other
it's a lot more
counties have
explicit.
handled it differently. Other counties have definitely handled it differently. We don't differentiate. A crop is a crop. It's ag, it's ag. That's all we care about. Other counties are looking at it and saying, this crop is a crop, but it has all of these impacts to it, and so they are concerned about things like energy consumption, and they are concerned about the fact that it produces odor that permeates and affects, and so there are counties that opted out and don't allow it at all.
Are there counties that have language where it is kind of hierarchical of
I believe so, yes.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, because it seems like, I mean, you could say the same thing about, cow farm or whatever. It has a smell. Like there's impacts, that affect the neighbors, but they've decided that, this is something we're gonna protect because it's.
And actually, that was a big topic at the countywide CAC. One of the people brought up that he's in I think a subdivision, it sort of sounded like, but he's next to maybe a dairy, but in any case, a very large farm, and he was complaining about the smell, and he said he should have known that before he bought the property. That should have been disclosed. Somebody should have told him. There should have been all of these other things, and couldn't figure that out.
And asphalt plant.
The agricultural rules were written for that, and that they ended up side by side. I don't know how they ended up side by side, but maybe it's that resource land. Is that the word?
It is, certainly the EFU is resource land, the AF and the F80 are resource lands, yes.
But there's that land that's not good for
Non-resource land?
non-resource land.
Okay, so the non-resource land,
I mean, maybe the subdivision ended up being on non-resource land, which happened to be right next to agricultural. I made that part up, but I was trying to think, how did the subdivision get next to, it's not supposed to happen, but.
and I don't know where the subdivision is, but sometimes you will find that you have RA zoning, for example, and it grows up and it's historical in its use. I mean, for example, Napa and Swenson have some RA zoning surrounding the RCC and the RCR zoning, the little nucleuses here at the intersections, and then you've got RA zoning around it. And the RA zoning is sort of a transitional zoning where you have, so you go from smaller lots, an acre, sometimes less, to the RA2, the RA1 and the RA2 with a 2-acre minimum, then you have the RA5, and then you get out to your resource lands. So you have this transition from denser populations to less dense to the resource lands. So you might have had somebody who spent some time accumulating a bunch of RA2 zoning, and then when he got enough of it, turned it into a subdivision right next to a dairy farm. I don't know. So I wasn't there. I don't know what the issue is.
Or there's the urban growth boundaries that could potentially be butting up against.
The urban growth boundaries are around the cities.
Right. But it's just not necessarily this example that would be potentially.
Well, it's easy to do. I mean, where I live used to be a dairy for generations. And then back in the 70s, Bert made sure that he got as much money out of that by zoning it downward as much as possible. But one side of Hillcrest Loop was a dairy and the other side was RA2s.
I cannot tell you how many times a week we field telephone calls from people who are the second generation or the third generation who now have the family farm, and they are trying to figure out how to maximize the profit out of it.
Right.
So I am constantly, and I'm sure Victoria is too, telling people
It's sad.
what it's going to take for them if they really, honestly, truly want to try and change the zoning on this AF zone property or F80.
Right. Well, and that's what we're talking about protecting,
Exactly.
explicitly here.
And so
is that kind of,
exactly, and
and
we're
we're just
explicitly
happily,
telling
yeah.
them
Which there's a certain
what it's going to
will
take.
with that.
Thousands of dollars and a
Yeah.
lot of time.
Right.
Well, and you still may not make it.
Right.
And we
That's
tell
right.
people this all the time.
It's a crapshoot.
You're going to be taking a goal exception,
Right.
and this is what it's going to take to do that, and you may not be successful. I spend,
Oh, nice.
I have a 20-minute spiel.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, it also seems like, there's other things that we grow for, like she was saying, flowers is one that maybe that's pleasant to live next to, but then hops, there's other farm crops that are used to make recreational substances. So I don't think weed is in a category on its own,
In this county, it sounds like what Judy says, in this county, it's not in a category of its own.
Right.
And I think the question they're putting out there is, should it be, or should there be some regulations that affect it? Because it's not, and historically, it's not a crop for food, it's not dairy, it's not those things that we have traditionally protected. It's different, and it has some different stigma to it, it has some different aspects to it. Should it be handled differently? And that was the question.
I'd rather live next to a weed farm than a cow farm, personally.
Wasn't there a big controversy in Jewel about somebody was gonna do something close to the school?
Yes.
So how was that resolved?
The gentleman withdrew his application and went away.
Yeah, but this is a generic question
Yeah.
for the committee is,
Right.
do you think the comprehensive plan for Northeast should treat them, should single out?
Right.
And I would think you might want to get some other counties' input about why they did it and the different reasons. Because if you don't know what those reasons are,
Right.
you're
Well, that's
talking
what I was-
specifically just for how you feel about it based on the knowledge that you have, which may not be enough knowledge to make
Sure.
those
Which is why, like, having some
decisions.
examples would be nice of how they have done that too.
Yeah, you might want to have to research that a little bit before
Right,
you.
exactly, reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
Because I would think in general, I don't want somebody telling me whether I can grow
Right,
blueberries or
exactly,
sheep.
exactly,
But, maybe at least in reference to schools or
right.
something like that, maybe it should be addressed.
Right, rather
something
than
like
waiting
that.
till like someone wants to do it and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
Well, was
we
the
didn't think of that.
application was it for retail or was it for grow?
It was for retail and also for processing.
Yeah.
And the processing was, were you here for this? You were here for this. The processing, as I recall, was for something a little bit more, you remember the accident?
Yeah.
The
Yeah, that's
fire?
right.
Yeah, it was more
oil?
that type of, with the oils, yeah. And this gentleman had some sort of, I mean, it was some new concept way of handling it, and so I don't know that it was particularly well documented in terms of how it, I don't know. It was like, oh, that's new and interesting, and we're seeing a lot of that with campuses.
But the proposal wasn't in an EFU zone.
No, it was in an RCC zone where the old Jewel Tavern used to be, I think. Overhanging the
Retail is
river.
retail.
Oh, yeah, no, it was RCC. But it was also some processing involved, but it was a certain distance from a school or something. I don't remember exactly, but basically it became more of a problem for him to deal with than he wanted to pursue.
Okay, well, sounds like maybe we'll get more information about that, but no one seems to have strong feelings that it should be a separate category at this point. Is that
Well, I
accurate?
mean, I agree that there's that slippery slope of not wanting to like dictate what people could do with
Yeah.
crops on their land.
Yeah.
Like suggested, maybe there should be some language around schools or other things like that, but that I don't think we should be telling people what they should grow
Right.
necessarily,
Mhm.
personally.
You're going to have an opportunity for that discussion as you get into the
Right.
housing and
Right.
transition.
Okay, great. I think we are nearing the end. Does anyone from the public that hasn't spoken already want to make any comments?
Is there anything else
Seems like people have been commenting throughout, but just want to give that opportunity.
I was just gonna share some of the numbers that I thought were interesting in the background report. So this is specific to Clatsop County. Since '78, the total overall acreage of farmland and average size of farms has declined. So I thought that was interesting, not only the acreage, but also the average size, the number of farms. Since '78, farmland in Clatsop County decreased 22,700 acres, from 22,700 acres to 15,000 acres. So since '78, a loss of 7,600 acres. I thought that one was interesting. But on the other side, not in the Google category, in the state, so this is agriculture, and in the state, 11% of the state net product is agriculture. Anybody know what percentage it is of forestry?
It's a big
The county is
Clatsop County's like,
85%.
yeah, huge.
85% of the economy?
Oh, I don't know about the.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
this is
no, we'll
economy.
get into the economy, in actually a gold mine. But we'll have some numbers for you about what forestry produces in the materials that Tori's gonna hand out to you shortly.
I was just interested that for the agriculture is 11%
I
state.
guess I might ask a question, you know, you say we dropped 7,000 acres, but I'll bet a lot of that went into environmental conversions of ag land to all these programs that Crest and others have been doing for decades.
And some of it, but a lot of it was Clatsop Plain. Yeah, Clatsop Plain used to be agriculture.
We need one for
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what
yeah.
conventional use.
Yeah, they grew
Thank you.
I
flowers,
just
all
want to
kinds
know
of
how much.
I
seed
mean,
crops.
the Lee Golf Course used to be
Right.
a big area.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. 11, so 11% of the state net product is agriculture, so statewide. 11% of the state's economy, 14% of the employment in Oregon is from agriculture. And then I thought this one was interesting. Oregon is one of the most agriculturally diverse states in the nation. 225 different types of crops and livestock. And then farm income from direct sales of local food increased by 106% from 2002 to 2012. That was my favorite one. the whole thing. Farm income from direct sales of local food increased by 106% from 2002 to 2012.
And that's a goal worth encouraging.
Right,
I think that's what we're saying.
right.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay. And so now would that be a good time for you to do the presentation that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I just wanted to share two things that I attended. Let's go. On Saturday, I went down to Nehalem and attended a workshop on watersheds and forests. It was called, look up, it's a watershed moment. There were 6, I don't know where they got that title. I didn't make the title.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Yeah, I know. There were 6 different speakers from all over the state and fabulous attendance. They did, when you put these things together, you never know who else is going to show up. They had over 100 people who showed up. And it was Tillamook residents and Clatsop County residents. And so a lot of discussion about how to protect domestic water and city watersheds in relationship to forestry practices. And forestry is our next goal coming up. And then also on Monday, I attended the county listening session. So Oregon Department of Forestry had proposed a cut down near Arch Cape. And as you read in the paper, they delayed it for a year. And so that was an interesting one to attend. And again, a lot of concern by residents in Clatsop County for how to protect watersheds and how that interfaces with forestry and forestry practices. So specifically clear cutting to the edge of streams and specifically herbicides. So those 2 things in water. So watersheds is a hot topic among Clatsop County citizens right now. And so then the question becomes now, as we're rewriting the comp plan, is there any way for us to think about how to protect watersheds and, what our role in that might be?
Great, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so do we want to review of meeting dates and times?
Yeah, so I am going to plug the speaker. There's going to be someone from the Oregon Department of Forestry at the 800 Exchange Building on October 17th. It's a Thursday at 3 p.m. So they're going to be discussing the Forest Practices Act. I think it'd be really important if you were interested in having some FaceTime with the Oregon Department of Forestry and had some questions for them. It would be a really great meeting to come to. There's going to be delicious snacks from Orchard, and yeah, so I hope that we can see you there. If anyone needs a flyer, I have one extra one. But anyway, so next month, as Julie mentioned, we're gonna try to get through goal 4 before Christmas. And, so we'll, if everyone's okay with taking the next, like December, I think in January off, is that what we're talking about?
At least December, potentially January,
Yeah.
part of it is staff getting caught up.
And countywide is ahead of us too, so we're all sort of trying to
Yeah,
pace
we'd like,
back up with each other.
we'd like to get everybody,
walk down now, will now be behind us.
right, well, if we can get everybody kind of to the same place, we can produce the materials and push it out to everybody so that everybody can respond. So that's,
So we're keeping with November meeting, but then potentially, yeah, taking
At least December,
Yeah.
take off.
have a high meeting.
So,
And I would really, really, really encourage you to come to this one on Oregon Forest Practices Act. I would just move heaven and earth to be there. And because it's ODF staff who is presenting, they will present one side of Forest Practices Act. And so I have been encouraging, inviting other people to come who have knowledge about how ODF does not protect watersheds. So it should be a good discussion, it should be a good dialogue. There will be two sides represented there. And I think it's important to be there.
great. And then the November one is on the 7th, is that right?
I think so.
Of the 4th? Okay, great.
So your next meeting is November 7th?
yeah, that's the first year.
And then the
Same time, same place?
October
Sounds good.
17th is the goal for.
Right.
Okay, great. Okay, oh, sorry. Just finish. Let's see. So then we talked about holiday schedule, we got the background material. Would anyone like to make any closing comments?
Thank you for facilitating.
Thank
Protect agricultural land.
Yay!
Oh, I know one, I should have said it sooner. In the last countywide one, because it was Soil and Water who spoke, they reminded us that they have grants and want to work with people and they designate different areas. And I think Chris Farr mentioned that to us when he was here time before last, but the designated area is the northwest, northeast right now. So they are looking for farmers and landowners to work with. And Chris is very disappointed, hasn't had any response from anybody in our area. So they have
Kelly.
money and expertise to send out, and they're not getting any takers.
I haven't gotten any information, so
What's the grant about?
Ed, can you speak more to it?
Well, they partially fund projects, like let's say you got a stream running through your place and you have a barn and there's manure getting into the stream. I don't know exactly the percentage, but maybe they put in 3/4 of the cost of the project up to a certain amount and you put in your sweat equity or cash.
similar to some like the NRCS project.
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, similar kind of things, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. Okay, well then I think this meeting is adjourned.